A wealthy college student thinks his family's money makes him untouchable as he terrorizes the university library week after week. The quiet librarian he mocks and humiliates seems powerless to stop him. But she's not who he thinks she is. And every cruel word, every arrogant gesture, every dismissive laugh is leading him toward a reckoning he never saw coming. Sometimes, the quietest people carry the heaviest secrets and the sharpest swords. Chapter 1. The Tyrant. Brandon Westfield owned every room he entered. At least, that's what he believed. The university library should have been a sanctuary of whispered conversations and rustling pages. Instead, it had become Brandon's personal kingdom of chaos. His voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings as he laughed into his phone, designer shoes propped on a table where centuries-old texts lay scattered like forgotten toys. "Dad's buying the new science wing," he announced to whoever was listening on the other end, "which means I can do whatever I want here." Other students hunched over their books, trying desperately to focus. A freshman girl with thick glasses looked up nervously, then back down at her chemistry notes. Brandon noticed. He always noticed the weak ones. "Hey, Four Eyes," he called out. "This is a library, not a homeless shelter. Maybe try studying somewhere that matches your income bracket." The girl's cheeks flushed crimson. She gathered her materials with shaking hands. From behind the circulation desk, Eleanor Hayes watched. She was 63 years old, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and reading glasses that hung from a beaded chain. To Brandon, she was invisible. Just another piece of library furniture, a relic from a bygone era when people respected things like books and quiet spaces. Eleanor made a note in her worn leather journal. Date, time, witness count. The girl's name, which she'd memorized from her library card months ago. Brandon kicked back in his chair, balancing on two legs. A rare manuscript lay open beneath his feet. The binding was cracking. "Excuse me." Eleanor's voice was soft as she approached. "That book is from our special collection. It needs to be handled with care," Brandon mocked in a high-pitched voice. Yeah, I've heard this speech. You know what else needs to be handled? Your retirement? Pretty sure they had libraries in the Stone Age too?" Laughter rippled through his group of friends, sprawled across nearby tables. Eleanor smiled, a strange, knowing smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I understand," she said quietly, and returned to her desk. Brandon watched her go, triumph warming his chest. This was the third time this week. She never did anything, just took it, like everyone else. He had no idea she'd just collected exactly what she needed. Chapter 2. Crossing the Line. 3 days later, the library was packed. Finals were approaching, and every table, every chair, every quiet corner was claimed by desperate students racing against deadlines. Brandon arrived like a storm. He didn't just enter. He exploded through the doors, music blaring from a portable speaker. Electronic beats shattered the concentrated silence. Heads snapped up in shock and frustration. "Brandon?" someone hissed from the back. He grinned, turning the volume higher. A petite girl named Maya sat near the entrance, her laptop open to a half-finished term paper that represented 30% of her grade. Coffee sat within reach, her third cup of the night. She'd been there since 6 a.m. Brandon's backpack caught her cup as he passed. Coffee erupted across her keyboard, her notes, her paper-covered table. Maya screamed as brown liquid flooded her work of 12 hours. "Oops," Brandon said, not breaking stride. "Should have been more careful where you put your stuff." Maya stood, hands shaking, staring at the ruin of her semester. Tears streamed down her face. Other students rushed to help, grabbing napkins, trying to save her laptop. It was already too late. The screen flickered and died. Eleanor appeared, as she always did, with a concerned expression and a roll of paper towels. She helped Maya salvage what little remained undamaged. "I'll speak to the administration about equipment replacement," Eleanor said gently. "We have emergency funds for situations like this." Brandon was already at his usual table, holding court with his friends. He pulled out his phone and began filming, a TikTok video where he narrated his heroic day at the library. But then he saw Eleanor approaching again. "Oh, here we go," he announced loudly, making sure his phone captured everything. "The ancient librarian is coming to scold me. Everyone watch this." Eleanor stopped 3 feet away. Her expression was unreadable. Brandon, I need to ask you to leave the library for today. Make me. I can call campus security. Brandon stood, towering over her by nearly a foot. Do you know who my father is? Do you know how much money he's given this school? You're nothing. You're a book stamper who never amounted to anything. I could have you fired with one phone call. He held his phone closer to her face, zooming in on her weathered features, her tired eyes. Look at this, guys, he said to his audience. This is what failure looks like. This is what happens when you don't matter. Eleanor met his gaze directly. Something flickered in her eyes, something that might have been pain, or might have been calculation. Thank you, Brandon, she said softly. This is exactly what I needed. The words made no sense. Brandon laughed, posting the video immediately. Within an hour, it had 300 shares. His friends called it savage, hilarious, epic. Eleanor returned to her desk and opened her leather journal. Her hand moved steadily across the page, recording every detail while her mind traveled to a place 10 years distant, to a young man who'd also thought himself untouchable. Her son. Her beautiful boy who'd stood up to a bully and paid with his life. She closed her eyes briefly, then continued writing. The real work was about to begin. Chapter 3. The Quiet Storm. For the next week, Brandon noticed something strange. The librarian was gone, not permanently. She'd appear for an hour, then vanish for the rest of the day. Other staff members covered the desk, looking uncomfortable when asked about Mrs. Hayes' whereabouts. Brandon didn't care. With Eleanor absent, he escalated. He brought friends who treated study tables like picnic benches. They ordered pizza deliveries to the library. They played video games on full volume. They rearranged entire sections of books into vulgar sculptures. She gave up, Brandon told his followers in another video. Couldn't handle the Westfield treatment. But while Brandon celebrated his victory, Eleanor was in meetings. The dean's office, the university council's office, the Title IX coordinator's office, campus security's surveillance room. She sat across from administrators with the patience of someone who'd done this before. Her leather journal lay open before them, each page a masterpiece of documentation. Dates, times, witnesses, incident descriptions written with legal precision. This is the 14th documented incident, she explained to Dean Richards, her voice steady. Each one progressively worse, each one with multiple witnesses who are afraid to come forward because Mr. Westfield has created an atmosphere of intimidation. Dean Richards shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Hayes, I understand your concern, but Brandon's father is our largest donor. The Westfield name is on 3 buildings. We need to be very careful about how we proceed. Eleanor's expression didn't change. Dean Richards, did you know I was a lawyer before I came here? The dean blinked. No. Your resume listed library science. I practiced education law for 27 years. I specialized in Title IX violations and hostile environment cases. She slid a photograph across the desk. A young man with her eyes smiled from the frame. This was my son, Daniel. He was a junior at State University when another student, a wealthy, connected student whose father was a major donor, decided Daniel didn't belong there. The harassment lasted 3 months. The administration did nothing. They were too afraid of losing funding. She paused, her voice quietening. Daniel took his own life 10 years ago. He was 20 years old. The room fell silent. After Daniel died, I won a $7 million settlement against that university for negligence and Title IX violations. I could have retired wealthy. Instead, I got my library degree and started working in university libraries. This is my 8th school in 10 years. She met the dean's eyes. I find students like Brandon Westfield. I document everything, and I make sure what happened to my son never happens to anyone else. Dean Richards' face had gone pale. Mrs. Hayes, I've already documented 14 incidents involving Brandon. I have video evidence from security cameras. I have witness statements from 28 students. I have the video Brandon himself posted of him harassing me, and I've discovered something interesting in his file. She pulled out another folder. Brandon had 3 similar incidents at his previous school, all suppressed after large donations from his father. If this university takes no action, and another student is harmed, you're looking at institutional negligence with a documented pattern. The lawsuit would be catastrophic. She stood, gathering her materials. I'm not asking you to expel Brandon because he's rude to me. I'm telling you that he's creating a hostile educational environment that violates federal law. You have 48 hours to begin disciplinary proceedings, or my documentation goes to the Office of Civil Rights and every major news outlet that covered Daniel's case." Eleanor walked out, leaving the dean staring at the photograph of her son. The trap had been set long before Brandon ever knew he was prey. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. Brandon received the notice on a Tuesday morning, a formal summons to appear before the University Disciplinary Committee. When he showed it to his father, Richard Westfield made 2 phone calls, one to his lawyer, one to the dean. "There's been a misunderstanding," Richard told Dean Richards smoothly. "My son can be exuberant. I'm sure we can resolve this with a donation to the library fund. Shall we say $500,000? "Mr. Westfield," the dean replied, "I need you to understand something. This isn't about money. This is about federal law." The hearing room felt like a courtroom. 5 committee members sat behind a long table. Brandon entered with his father and their lawyer, confident this would be over in 30 minutes. Then Eleanor Hayes entered, carrying 3 boxes of materials. "Who is she?" Richard whispered to his lawyer. "The librarian who filed the complaint." "A librarian? This is ridiculous." Eleanor arranged her materials with practiced efficiency. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms. "Members of the committee, I provided you with comprehensive documentation of 14 incidents involving Mr. Brandon Westfield over the past 6 weeks. Each incident created a hostile educational environment in violation of Title IX. I've also provided video evidence from campus security cameras, supplemented by videos Mr. Westfield himself posted on social media." She pulled up the TikTok video on the room's monitor. Brandon's voice filled the space. "This is what failure looks like. This is what happens when you don't matter." Several committee members winced. "Additionally," Eleanor continued, "I've provided witness statements from 28 students, many of whom were initially afraid to come forward due to Mr. Westfield's threats regarding his family's influence." Richard stood abruptly. "This is a witch hunt. My son is being targeted because of our family's success. We've been generous to this university." "Your generosity," Eleanor interrupted calmly, "does not purchase immunity from federal law, nor does it erase the pattern of behavior documented here." She turned to the committee. Mr. Westfield's previous university received a confidential settlement of $200,000 to suppress similar complaints. I've obtained those records through legal channels. Brandon's lawyer's head snapped toward Richard. "You didn't tell me about previous incidents." "They were resolved," Richard said through gritted teeth. "They were covered up," Eleanor corrected, "just as you're attempting to do now." She addressed the committee again. "I've spent 10 years ensuring that institutional fear of wealthy donors never again results in a vulnerable student being harmed. If this committee does not take appropriate action, I will pursue every legal avenue available, and I assure you, I'm very good at my job." The room fell silent. Eleanor's expertise was evident in every word, every document, every perfectly constructed argument. This wasn't an emotional plea from a victimized librarian. This was a strategic dismantling by someone who'd been planning this moment for weeks. Brandon felt something unfamiliar. Fear. The head of the committee cleared his throat. "Mr. Westfield, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Brandon opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Every arrogant word, every dismissive gesture, every moment he'd thought himself untouchable suddenly seemed childish and stupid. He looked at Eleanor, really looked at her, and saw not the insignificant woman he'd mocked, but someone who'd weaponized his cruelty against him with surgical precision. He started, then stopped. The committee deliberated for 20 minutes. When they returned, their decision was unanimous. Immediate expulsion. Permanent notation on academic record, ban from campus property, recommended reporting to other institutions. Richard Westfield threatened lawsuits. His lawyer advised him that pursuing legal action would only expose the previous cover-up and create worse publicity. They left in silence, Brandon's college career ending not with fanfare but with the quiet click of a closing door. Chapter 5. The Letter. Brandon sat in his apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes. His father had stopped speaking to him. His friends had distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with that expulsion drama. His social media had been flooded with messages from students thanking the university for finally taking action. He'd been erased from the place he thought he owned. A knock at the door startled him. When he opened it, Eleanor Hayes stood in the hallway, looking smaller somehow in her gray cardigan and sensible shoes. "May I come in?" she asked. Brandon stepped aside, too drained to argue. Eleanor sat in the only chair not covered with boxes. She pulled an envelope from her purse and placed it on the coffee table. "I want you to understand something," she said quietly. "I didn't do this because I hate you. I did this because I love my son." She pulled out the photograph she'd shown the dean. Daniel. He was brilliant, kind, and thought he could handle a bully through reasoning and patience. He was wrong. The bully escalated. The administration protected their donor, and Daniel decided the world was too cruel a place for someone like him. Brandon stared at the young man in the photograph. He looked normal, happy, human. "After Daniel died, I made a choice," Eleanor continued. "I could let grief destroy me, or I could use my skills to prevent other mothers from losing their sons, other students from losing hope." She gestured toward the envelope. "You're young, Brandon. You're not irredeemable. But you were on a path that would have destroyed you and others. Someone needed to stop you before you became the kind of person who pushes someone too far." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "That envelope contains the name of a therapist who specializes in entitlement and empathy development. It also contains information about community colleges where you could restart your education. What you do next is your choice. But understand, actions have consequences. The question is whether you learn from them." Eleanor left. Brandon sat alone, staring at the envelope. After 20 minutes, he opened it. Inside was the therapist's information, the college brochures, and one more thing, a handwritten note. "My son never got a second chance. You have. Don't waste it. E.H." For the first time in his privileged life, Brandon Westfield cried. Chapter 6. 1 year later. Eleanor Hayes sat in her small office at the library, grading evaluation forms from the library science students she now mentored. Her leather journal lay closed on her desk, its pages full, but with room for more entries if needed. On the wall beside Daniel's photograph hung a small framed news clipping. "University expels student after librarian's detailed documentation reveals pattern of harassment." Below it, letters from students thanking her for making the library feel safe again. Her phone buzzed. An email from an unfamiliar address. "Mrs. Hayes, I don't know if you remember me. I'm in my second semester at community college now. I'm studying social work. My therapist says I'm making progress. I wanted you to know that I think about what you said every day. You were right. Someone needed to stop me. Thank you for being that someone. I'm trying to be the person who deserves the second chance you gave me. Brandon." Eleanor read the email twice, then looked at Daniel's photograph. "One more, sweetheart," she whispered. "One more who chose to be better." She closed her laptop and returned to her work, knowing that somewhere in the quiet corners of the library, another student might need her vigilance, another bully might need her documentation, another life might need saving. Eleanor Hayes had lost her son, but she'd found her purpose, and in the silent spaces between the bookshelves, justice whispered on. Remember, your actions echo far beyond the moment. Choose wisely who you become, for someone is always watching, always remembering, and sometimes, when it matters most, always ready to hold you accountable.